Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to today's sold out event. It's very exciting. And I just want to begin today with the following acknowledgement of country. So I pay respect to the traditional and original owners of this land, the Muaninya people, to pay respect to those that have passed before us and to acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal people, who are custodians of this land. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. And of course, thank you to the State Libraries and Archives Service for including us in their National Family History Month program. And I'm very excited to be here. It's been a long time in the making, and I found the research for this topic very fun and rewarding. And I spoke to lots of different people, and I just want to single out one collective group who have come down today, and that's our friends at the Signet Living History Museum. So we have Deb, Lena, Liz, and Rayan. So that was the main inspiration for me going in there 12 months ago when I first moved to Hobart, and they've got a really incredible collection there and lots of really important photographs, which we've included in today's talk. But then my second visit this year and going down and having these conversations with them and looking through their photo albums and getting firsthand experience of what it actually was like during the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And yeah, some insider's knowledge, which was really excellent. So thank you. We'll begin. So remember today, everyone, that it is a social history. So I hope to present a slightly different perspective on my understanding of events. And we will jump around this timeline a little bit. So we look at the 20s to the 80s, the 1980s. And we will touch on the really significant events of the time. So obviously when the UK joined the European Economic Community. So that was obviously a huge factor. And well, you might think it was sort of disastrous, but we'll look at how they managed and who went to lend a hand and who sort of poured a bit of money in to keep the apple industry going and what was important there. And of course, like as the world got bigger and the wars came and went and continue to come, we look at how the government did help them to a point, and we do have records because we are a federal government archive. So we look at what's in our collection and other stories along the way as well. So we'll begin on a positive note, like it's not all doom and gloom, because it was a really vibrant industry. So we look here, and here's a photo looking down in the area, down the Huon Valley. And at this time, as you can see, there's our item citation. So this was a bit of a paparazzi shot, and it would have been government-issued photographers taking these. And despite both wars, there was prosperity in the apple market. And as we see through our collection, there was a boom, and it's documented throughout. So here's some more images from our collection, and they're enjoying themselves. And here we see they're working hard, and despite sort of the heavy weight on their shoulders and things, they're still collecting and not groveling or anything and working as a team, which is really good. And I think another thing that it's important to keep in mind, like for me, because this was a whole new thing for me 12 months ago, but I noticed moving to Tasmania, and you see walking through the sea in such a sort of aesthetically pleasing place. And then as we go through these records, and we'll show you some in our labels and sort of the apple crate labelling and things, like it does really deep into the industry, and there's obviously lots of artists down here, and particularly in Cygnet and the Huon Valley. It does sort of tie in nicely, and that's what really grabbed my attention when we were looking for topics. So we'll continue through. Now, would anyone like to read it for me? No, that's all right. I can read it out. So this is an excerpt from an article we found in the Mercury newspaper in 1928. So we were just thinking of the boom, and we are exporting quite significantly to Europe. But now this is an article from someone observing what was happening when the apples actually got to Europe. So this passerby says, one of the first things when I arrived in London was a convoy of motor lorries passing along Fleet Street with gaily labelled boxes of New Zealand apples on them. The motor lorries that I have seen unloading Tas apples at Covent Garden might have been putting out soap. So from there, we can gather that, so this is 1928, and here, this image on the left here, this is from one of our postcards. This is one of our favourite images, and it's just coming up. This is the revealing effects slowly coming into focus now. And now we can see beautiful clear markings, because what they would have had early on is they're concentrating so much on getting the fruit to Europe, they're not really worrying about what people are seeing at the docks. But of course, like with any business, any industry, it's all about marketing. So these New Zealand apples and other competitors, lots from South Africa, it was so visible where they were from. And we think even now, like we see all these exotic things, like if we want to buy some olive oil from Italy or anchovies or whatever, like we want to know it's imported. And this is what they started doing later on, so the 30s and the 40s. So they took more notice of what the apples were coming in. And here are some examples of the labels, and quite artistic, really. This is early 20s. This is from one of our customs records photo albums. And this is actually a really beautiful record. It's a big bound volume, and any item that was registered or painted, then it would be put in this album. And you can flick through the whole thing, and we've got that in our collection as well. And this is early on. So this is from early 1920s. So you can see there's a big focus on the label, on the actual jar or can, but not as much focus on the actual crate and the box that the apples are coming in initially. And just looking at the artistry, I'll just show you something else that we found. So while we were preparing, myself and my colleagues, Bruce and Christina, we're doing a big descriptive task at the moment, which I'll talk about a little later, but we're all looking for little records which might add something to it. And Bruce actually found this one and shared this one with me. And this is the Clark family doing their apple carving. So this is down Glen Huon's late 70s. And we see his fine motor skills on display here. And then here's an old one. And we can see it's sort of aging like us and wrinkling and things. So that was a really nice one. That was one of my favourites. But yeah, there's lots of beautiful images of their work in our collection as well. So thank you, Bruce, for sharing that one. Now, another thing which I thought was important to mention, so throughout the peaks and troughs of the industry, it was interesting for me, and also this was speaking to the museum as well, but just also through my own research, and other librarians in the building had looked at apples before. And it's interesting to put against a timeline these government schemes that came in. So this first one here we see on the screen, this is a federal government scheme, and we see the timeline here, so 39 to 40. And of course, World War II in and around. And what the government actually did is they coined this fruit acquisition scheme. So there's this big booming industry, but of course our big market is Europe, one of, and the fruit can't get there. And even if the fruit could get there, like you think you're loaded on a ship and excellent, send it off. Like even if you could have done that, chances are it would have been blown up anyway. Like there's a war going on. So what the government did was they paid for the fruit that would have been sold. So similar to this last one, this orchard readjustment scheme, it sort of gave them a bit of a free pass to experiment more with different varieties because the government's essentially paying their wage in a sense. And they had this flexibility and this freedom. So that's when they were sort of looking at canning and dehydrating and other things and other varieties. So it was sort of a blessing, sort of, like it's still such a sad time. It's a disaster time, but it was interesting to see that and with that timeline. So then from 49, we will go through this chronologically because it's a lot easier to understand. So this triple, so from here, the Commonwealth Fruit Acquisition Scheme, and then following on, a bit of a recovery from the war, and then the peak season was 61, 62. So that's when the business was really booming and they were just making money hand over fist. And then a lot of these photographs of the prosperity, the prospering times would have been this 61, 62 period. But then, of course, what we spoke about before is when Europe joined the EEC, European Economic Community. And then that was in 73. So obviously we saw the writing on the wall and they thought, well, things are going to go south because it was such an enormous market for them. So what they introduced is the tree pool scheme. And what this was is essentially they help people in financial turmoil to leave the area and leave apple farming. And was similar, it's a way to think of, it's like back in the day, like, well, I remember I used to get paid $1 to remove thistle, and like you quickly add up and it's prosperous, sort of. But it's similar here, like they're trying to repurpose the land and they're trying to have more grazing, maybe try different fruits and not leave just an empty area. Like they're thinking of ways around the problem because obviously it is a huge problem. It was, but they continued on and a lot of farmers did stay and it's still a big apple farming region today, but not what it was. And that's also what I learned more from going to the museum that day as well and what we spoke about there. So we move on to this final government scheme here, and this was the Orchard Readjustment Scheme, and this is in 81, so this is after the collapse, and they sort of had a few years to wrap their heads around it. And then here is when they're thinking, okay, so our European market is tricky, so we're going to look to mainland Australia. And one of the, not a problem, but something to sort of meander around is the varieties in mainland Australia were different to the varieties in Europe, more popular varieties. So just similarly to that first point, here with the Orchard Readjustment Scheme, that was a time of experimentation as well. And what we found were different varieties that were more popular, and they had to adjust, and they did so well. And we see here at that time during the 80s, the red and the golden delicious were the popular ones in Victoria. And it's also important to remember that Europe were miles ahead in terms of keeping apples. So their technology and their cold stores were far more efficient than ours. So that was something also to remember, that we were sort of behind the eight ball a little bit. And now we move on. We're going to quickly look at a little descriptive task that we've been doing. So in the office, we've been looking at a custom series, and that's series P437/1. I'll just get that up on the screen here. So here we have the item citation. So this is from our collection. And this is how you would locate the record through record search. And here we look at the title. This was actually found by a colleague of mine, Barry. He's not actually here today, but he thought, he was pretty thrilled and thought that I might think it is interesting to include in today's talk. So there's more collaboration between us. And we look at the title. So this Mr. Longley of Kettering, he's in trouble and he's been fined for packing all these apples at Black Spot. And we see that he's got 19 children and 15 of whom still live at home. So I saw that and, well, I've never heard of 19 children in my life. Like, my mum is one of 10, and we thought that was pretty extreme. But 19, and to keep them all working, incredible. And they're all part of the business. And, well, we think we're looking at those hard times, financial difficulties. So he might have thought, do them some good, come down and help with the business. And maybe they needed it. Maybe he had no other choice but to employ his children and just cop the fine rather than going to the packing sheds, spending the money. He just decided to do it himself. So it's sort of pretty admirable, really. And they made some mistakes, but, we don't know how much the fine was. So it might have just been worth it to just wear it. But well, I spent a long time thinking about this record, to be honest. But that sort of gives us, well, it's an interesting subject, but also it opens up the door to interpretations. So I think I'm looking at this record, and it's really anyone who does come into our history room, we're always encouraging them to interpret our records, and that's why we're here, really. So we will give a record to you if you've requested it, and you do with it what you will. Really, it's just like reading a book in a sense. Like, you make up your own ideas, whether you think something was right or wrong or could have been done better. And, well, it made me think about this record. So I'm thinking, like, well, I hear all these fables. I go to dentists like everyone, and I hear apple a day keeps the, et cetera, and all these benefits. And then I think of like the hidden benefits of being around apples and eating so many apples and to have so many children, and they're all able-bodied as well. And, well, it makes me think, like the benefits to human spirit and persistence and patience with all these children, and like the sexual vitality of someone as well. It was really, really important to see for me, and inspiring, really. And I thought, well, is this the glue that holds this family together, these apples? So, yeah, that's what I gathered from that. And I'm sure Barry would have different ideas as well if he was here as well to present. Of course, excellent question. So the record's here. So if you wanted to come in and look at it, of course, and luckily for you, what was your name? Chris. Luckily for you, it's quite a big record as well. So some of them, you know, as you imagine, the book has shorter pages, but this record has, I think, it's in our standard category, so that's our pricing. So that is...
We can't see it on the screen. We want to read it out on the screen.
Oh, right. You can't read the red circle part. Okay, I can read it for you. Well, I didn't have any volunteers last time, so it sort of scared me off a bit. But I can. So the red circled part, oh, well, we can read it all. It's not very long. So Mr. Longley is a very hardworking, conscientious man, honest in all his dealings, and is having a very hard struggle to make a living from this industry, like we were talking about before. His last year's crop resulting in serious loss. For some years, Mr. Longley had his apples packed by the Port Huon packing shed, but of late, the packing has been done by his wife and children. He has 19 children, 15 of them being at home, and it was through their want of knowledge regarding the amount of black spot which would be permitted that the fine was imposed. There was a marked improvement in the 1930 pack, as only one breach was recorded, a warning being issued. And if we look, well, that's interesting actually. So if we look at the date, which you probably can't read as well, I apologise for that. So the contents date range of the record is 1929 to 1929. So this last point should be 1929 to 1930, but it tells me that maybe this was the pack before and then they improved. So it was worth it. Very good. Okay, we'll move on now. And here, speaking of all these children and families, now we'll move to the images that we've collected copies of from the Signet Living History Museum. And here we have some families. And what I was interested in for the most part was what happened to all these properties after these farmers left. Not all the farmers left, but many did. And what I learned was there was this, you know, quite a large migration wage, quite a large, quite a large wave of migration down the valley. And during this period, so 60s, 70s, and here we're looking at a photograph. So this is from one of my favourite parts of their collection, this big black photo album, which has so many photographs and all contributed by people in the area. And that's what really fascinated me. And I took lots of photos and then we started talking, like, who are these people? And what I learned was it was this big wave and many mainlanders came down to the area, and the whole idea of, you know, the resettlement was, it's always interesting to see a whole new group of people coming to a place and trying to establish themselves, and all, you know, we can imagine their trials and tribulations and other things, and it could be a strain at times, but I thought it was really beautiful. And I was speaking to the ladies at the museum, and they were talking, and, you know, the labels that they might have been given, and one word that came up is opportunists. And I think, well, I consider that a compliment, really. Like, I consider myself an opportunist. Like, I took this job because it was an opportunity, and I moved to Tasmania because it was an opportunity. And I think it's really interesting to hear about these mainlanders coming down and they're telling their friends back at home, and they see this cheap land and they see what a beautiful place it is. And a lot of them were empty lots and they jumped at it. And I thought it was just a really interesting narrative, and it's been documented so well by the museum. So I thought that was really nice. So I'll just share a few pictures from their collection. And here we have one of their houses and some children. And a theme that also runs through is the repurposing of things. There's other ones which we decided we didn't get permission from the appropriate people to use them in today's presentation, but they're beautiful ones of, like, you know, it's just a so-and-so house, but they've really decorated in their own way and everyone looks so jovial and there's someone cooking out the front. So there's lots of really good photographs if you want to go down there and see for yourself. We've just got a couple here. Now, this isn't down the Huon, but I just liked it because she looks so happy. And I think that's that park across the road from the Whaler in town, I think. Sort of looks like, it looks a bit barer, but I think that's where it is. And if you recognise anyone, you know, you raise your hand and leave a comment if you like. And here's another one when they're moving. As full as. Oh, yes. Oh, perfect.
Moving up Toby's Hill, our block,
Uh-huh.
that was our beginning. You look better. 1978. From Melbourne,
What was the year?
1978.
Right. Well, you've done a good job.
I'll just say one point. When we first looked at the block, it was in total mist. It's 400 metres. We've got totally straight windows and stringy bars.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was a bit of a metaphor that we actually had no idea what our future was going to be.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fog. So we just sort of went from day to day.
Yeah. Oh, you made a good call, and very brave of you as well. And here's another one as well. So we talk about the artistry of the area, and these were some photographs that I took of these posters about these theatre shows that they had down there. So this one on the left is the Signet Town Hall. This was shown in. This is Seduced. And then here we have another one as well, New England Honeymoon, a comedy in one act. And then this is by Bob Herbert, a play about Australian-made chauvinism and double sexual standards. So looking at this new wave of people coming in, I was very interested, and it brings us to another part of our collection, really. And this is the immigration records. So we're here, and well, a big part of it for me was celebrating different people in different communities. And here we have a few photographs of migrants in employment in Australia. And it's a big part of our public inquiries. And, well, we can help you with this part as well, along with the apples. So that brings us to where you can find us. So we share the history room space behind you with the state libraries and archives. and we're open to the public from 9:30 a.m. till 5 p.m. Wednesday to Friday. Well, thank you all, everyone, so much for taking the time out of your days. And I hope you found something to take away.
Apple.
And if anything, well, we hope we should eat another apple and, enjoy ourselves.
And I'd just like to thank Nick for a great presentation. And if anyone has any questions, is there any questions online as well, Clifford? Do anybody online want to? You don't have to rush away, Nick, do you? So if anybody wants to not actually ask in person, but we've got a person.
Did you go into Frank's at all and look at their history?
No,
Oh,
Frank's.
Frank's is at Franklin.
Apple.
No, I didn't.
Make cider.
That's started.
Because cider, apple,
Uh-huh.
and it's actually a lot of people go there for lunch.
Yeah, right. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I'll write it down.
Yeah,
Write it down.
Frank's. It's on the highway.
Yeah.
Going through Franklin.
It relates to the Clark family, and they were people who bought property down there in Jane Franklin's time.
Uh-huh.
And you'll get a lot of history there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you. What was your name?
Maria.
Maria. Thank you, Maria. And what was your name?
Carol.
Carol. Thanks, Carol.
Ben Willie Smith.
I've been to Willie Smith. Did anyone have any questions about the museum, the Signet Living History Museum, or about our collection at the National Archives?
Where is the Signet?
Where is it? It's on the main street. It's just opposite sort of that bottom pub. It's next to the public toilet block. And they've just had renovations as well, actually. Yeah, so it's looking good.
Just to say that the museum is entirely volunteer run. We do try to be open every day, but sometimes you'll find that it's closed. I think there's a phone number at the daytime where people can get in touch, make an appointment. Any other questions?
Any more questions?
Just a query too, as you're going through Grove, there's, in the probably last 4 or 5 years, they pulled out and reshaped the land and put in some dams, and there's apple orchards running from one area up to the other side of the highway. And there's massive sheds, brand new sheds up the back, and that's huge apple orchards. Perhaps look at what the next step is,
Yeah.
Why are they replanting and where they're getting the wood from, et cetera, et cetera.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's just, it's a massive shed. I'm sure you can go in and have a look at it, and see then and now.
Yeah.
You'll find that was owned by the Hanson family.
Yeah.
And it's one of the original settlement was in 1842 by a man called Silas Parsons.
Yeah.
He was the first property owner down there.
The Hanson family.
The Hanson family now own it.
Uh-huh.
And they're the ones doing replanting, and of course there's a lot of value added going on in the apple industry there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions, you can come and ask Nick.
You've got them great.
And on your, thank you. And on your way out, feel free to grab an apple here. This organic. And you can grab a pen and a pencil or anything you like. Thank you everyone for coming.